Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this episode, or rather, I would say the new season, the new series of Product Talk with Maldi. As many of you would know, that we had a brief pause for the last few months, and here I'm back with a new series where we will be doing a lot more talking to the product leaders, founders, and AI practitioners. So, in that context, I'm super excited to be hosting this first episode of this season with Rajesh Chandran, who is a very popular and seasoned product leader, especially in the Indian product community. Rajesh has worked with some of the big brands like Cisco, Twilio, and now he's working with Tata Communications. He's somebody who comes with 2 decades of experience. He has worked on global products, has spent time building products India and in the US. He's somebody who coaches and consults with startups. And most important, he's also a fellow podcaster. Watch out his show, also called as Product Artisans. Now, how did we get started about this episode, right? Rajesh and I connected a few weeks back. And I think one thing which has been common between us is that we both are veterans. We have spent a good amount of time building products, and we were probably one of those people who started the journey of product management when it was still a very new concept in India, somewhere between 2005 to 2010. Now, when we started talking, we realized that, while a lot of product management concept has been picked up from industries like FMCG, manufacturing, automotive, but the pace at which technology has evolved, it's much faster than any other industries. And in context of that, the roles and responsibilities, the scope, the operating model of the product managers has also evolved. So we are actually putting together an article which talks about these different what we call as eras or waves of product management, what has changed, what has worked, what has not worked in each of these eras. So do keep an eye on that and do give it a read. And in this episode today, actually Rajesh and I are going to double down on some of those concepts which we are also discussing in the article. Welcome to the episode, Rajesh.
Hey, thanks, Malti. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Rajesh, why don't we start with this, right? I mean, you are somebody who has spent 2 decades building tech products, right? So, let's get started with how do you see what are these different waves and how has the overall product management role has kind of evolved and how does it looks like today?
Yeah, thanks. I think, in this era of AI and LinkedIn, it looks like product management has been around forever. And the truth is it's not. So let's take a step back, right? So if you go back to maybe the early 2000s, when a lot of new technology was coming up, enterprise, and you talk about this wave of virtualization and then cloud and applications and web applications, followed by mobile applications, right? There was a huge push to have innovation as a charter. I still remember my CTO constantly talking about innovation, and then they looked around and they're like, okay, I got to pin this on somebody, and they're like, we'll pin it on this guy and we'll call him a product manager, right? And it was called product marketing manager back then. So it was a far more strategic role in the sense that you would work to create a business case, you would plan a launch of a product, right? Writing specifications was certainly part of it, but it was probably a smaller part of the bigger role, right? Because organizations were still getting introduced to technology and innovation. So in that context, that was kind of the first wave of era one, I would call it, of product management. And again, there weren't too many product managers back then. They were just marketing managers or product marketing. I still remember interviewing for roles for product marketing back then because there was no product management.
Me too.
Yeah. And you did everything. The thing I loved about it is you did everything. You picked up the phone, you talked to customers, you read feedback, you wrote surveys, you did marketing, you did launch, practically did everything, right? And I think that was a great thing. I don't know if people pick up the phone and talk to customers anymore, but it was quite popular back then. And then you kind of had this second wave, right? This next era where we had this explosion of tech, which was in the social media space, right? And thanks to Facebook, Google, Snapchat, and others, right? There was this huge wave of technology, and again, you needed people who could manage and kind of bring these the business and the technology together, and that was the product management discipline. In fact, if you recall, Google announced or launched a associate product manager program because they couldn't find enough product managers. They created that from scratch, right? And that's kind of a legacy from Google. But product managers continue to increase in terms of growth and responsibility. And then we shift to era 3, and era 3 was the SaaS boom that happened. SaaS was everywhere, enterprise SaaS was everywhere, led by Salesforce and others. And in that era, not just product management, but I would say adjacent disciplines such as user research, product design, customer success, sales, etc., all of those kind of grew. And the reason I highlight those disciplines is all of them tie back to product management in some way, shape, or form. So you went from this kind of a centralized model, right, into kind of a hub and spoke model, for lack of a better term, right? And then from there, we're in era 4, which is AI native, right? And era 3 also included cloud as well. So we're this is kind of the timeline. So if you look at it, according to estimates, there are between 1 to 2 million product managers globally, right? Depending on which data set you look at. I think it's probably close to million and a half. The challenge, so therefore, is what is the definition of product management? And the answer is it varies. It varies from geography to geography. It varies from industry to industry, right? It varies from domain to domain, and that's been part of the challenge in this kind of as this eras play out, how the role of a product manager and the expectations associated with that would continue to shift. So that's kind of how I see it in terms of the evolution.
No, very, very brilliantly put, right? I mean, as I think the industry also matured, and of course, as you said, like between the traditional way, I pretty much remember doing everything, from doing pre-sales demos to actually discussing, okay, how do we do the distribution, and with the advent of SaaS and those kind of things, just at the pace at which the products were being delivered, that that velocity suddenly changed, and that also meant that we kind of focus on much more on other things. And I do have some follow up questions. I think, but one of the most follow up question important. This is something a debate I constantly see on social medias or in the product communities is that with this whole evolution, there are certain specializations, right? For example, nowadays you see, or probably even in era 3 that you spoke about, you needed product managers who come with mobile experience, product managers with building SaaS products, right? And today, a lot of further specialization is have you done platform thing, or in that probably could be, AI platform or any domain specific or AI PMs. So, what does that mean in the current era? Especially, I think this will be very interesting for people who are just thinking about building their career in product management. What is your take on being a generalist versus a specialist? Do you really think that the generalist era is gone?
The answer is it depends. So if you are in tech today, you're in a product platform company or in one of the FANG companies, obviously you're optimizing for technical expertise. And that's platform expertise, data expertise, AI expertise, proven experience with building API-based products, experience with marketplaces, etc. Right? So that's the kind of the weightage, and that's the market demand, as it were, and that keeps shifting here and there. But in a sense, if you're in the SaaS or the tech ecosystem, that's absolutely table stakes today. I think the answer is more complicated if it's outside of tech, because very often I find product managers struggling to break from, say, a SaaS company and move into a pharma or a healthcare vertical, as an example. And there, because they expect you to come in with some knowledge of pharma and vertical, and it becomes a chicken and egg situation, because on you don't have that experience. You need that experience to kind of break in, right? So I think in some of the, I would say, less digitized verticals, let's put it that way, manufacturing, maybe healthcare to some extent, I think it's okay. You're kind of jack of all trades a little bit. You do need some domain expertise and you can kind of get away with it. But where the level of digitization is extremely high, let's take fintech, let's take e-commerce, the level of automation and the level of digitization is extremely high. You have to almost be a very heavy specialist and over indexing on tech. So it's part tech, it's part domain. right? And I think for a brief period of time, there was a lot of talk about growth PM, thanks to product-led growth. But thankfully, that noise has subsided now. I think we can get back to brass tacks. But that's how I see the lay of the land.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Because I think it's not whether, because there's sometimes questions come whether this is better or that is better. But I think it is kind of very contextual to the nature of problem you are solving. And I think one thing which people miss is that you already have some experience. So reflect on that, look at what are your strengths, and further based on that, build it up.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my personal experience and background, right? So I was into platform product management. I decided to pick up machine learning, building machine learning products, and then I tagged on conversational AI, and of course now you have generative AI. So I think it's like a portfolio, right? You're assembling your own portfolio. You have a portfolio of funds, you have debt, you have equity, you have money markets, and this is like that, right? And you can only connect the dots looking backward. So you're better off aggregating and collecting those different experiences and then figuring out where that basket of experiences or the portfolio of skills that you have, where does it apply the most, right? Where does it make sense the most? Because one of the concerns I have is a lot of people are trying to kind of game the system, right? 5 years ago it was data science, then it was like blockchain, crypto, now it's AI, and everybody's trying to become an AI PM. So if you're just trying to kind of constantly game it, are you spending meaningful time acquiring
Mm.
skills that will stand the test, right? So maybe by building platform products or AI products, there's some deeper set of skills, like what are the secondary and tertiary set of skills that you're building, which will stand the test of time once AI evolves and matures into something else tomorrow. And I
Right.
think that is fundamentally lacking.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think there was a time, probably when we were students, we said only, doctors have to study constantly, but now I think every function has to constantly upskill themselves, right? Especially for functions like ours, where tech is changing very fast and has a huge impact on the way the products are being designed. Now, jumping into that, Rajesh, I mean, you yourself have been kind of constantly upskilling, reading up, building up, right? So, what do you think? How is it the overall product management role is kind of shaping up? And what do you think in the new era, what you called as AI native? What do you think are going to be some of the core skills that will help PMs to, let's say, survive this disruption and
Yeah.
sustain it rather?
Yeah, look, I'll answer the first one. So, in terms of what is the shape shifting that's happening, and there's a lot going on, right? There's tech disruption that's going on. There's platform disruption that's going on. So, the multiple disruptions that are happening. So, I think if somebody's watching this, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's okay, right? Because these are kind of multiple tectonic shifts that are happening at the same time, and they rarely converge. And there's a convergence that's happening across hardware, software, digital, etc. I think, again, at these times, it's important to think about fundamentals. So, what are the fundamentals, right? And the inconvenient truth is a lot of product managers, I think, ignore these fundamentals. The fundamentals of any business is to maximize revenue, increase revenue, reduce cost, right, and improve customer satisfaction. So, to the extent that what you do impacts one or more of the other, and you're able to clearly show a line of sight to that, then I think you're in a good position.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter what the latest model, Gen AI model that came out. I think 5.2 from ChatGPT just launched, and I think it came right after 5.1. So who knows what's next, right? Gemini 3 came before that. So you can't plan around that. And it's a bit disappointing that in a lot of conversations I have, not just with PMs and PM leaders, that they don't index towards that, right? I haven't met a product manager or leader who got fired for walking up to the leadership, the executive or the CEO, and saying, here are the three things I did, helped increase revenue, reduce cost, and improve customer satisfaction, and here's how it happened, right? Clear line of sight, clear impact. I've seen plenty of product managers lose out because they're like, well, I shipped this many features last month, and we did the backlog, we improved our execution velocity and all of that stuff. So it kind of boggles my mind when we talk about AI and we only talk about increasing shipping velocity. That's absolutely critical. It's essential. Not denying that, disputing that. But what's here to stay are the business fundamentals. And if you as a PM don't understand those fundamentals, or you're not able to show a line of sight to your leadership, then you're on the losing end of the game. Doesn't matter which Gen AI certification you went and got last. I think you're still on the losing end of the equation.
Yeah, completely. I mean, while, the, as you said, technology has been evolving, maybe the ways of doing things is evolving fast, but I think the fundamentals of building product remains the same, right? And if people don't focus on building their craft on that and focus on the balance of business and customer, then they are already kind of not set up for success,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you talked about skills, right? I mean, you have to master unit economics. Again, B2B, B2C doesn't matter, or B2B to C. You need to understand master economics. What percentage of your time do you spend talking to your counterparts in finance? Do you understand planning? Do you understand budget? Do you understand how money gets allocated to different products? So if you're building a new product, right, and it's a big bet, which means there's a high risk of failure, do you understand how much to be allocated to that versus something which is just kind of run off the mill? It's important for you to just not just understand but also shape these things. You need to control your destiny. It's easy to complain about the number of tickets and Jira stories and that you have, but what are you doing fundamentally, either as again a senior product manager or a product leader, to take control of your destiny and understand these things and then use that to shape and influence decisions? I think it's still lacking in a lot of cases from my perspective.
Yeah. Actually, that's a very interesting point, Rajesh, because I think the minute I speak to any aspiring PMs or even PM practitioners, it is more about, okay, tell me, for example, AI tools which can help me do, let's say, write PRDs, do my research, do my, synthesis of the research, or probably create test data, right? So now I think the goodness of today is that there are tons of these tools, and I am hoping with efficiently using these tools, PMs can free up some of their time, right? Now, going part to the part which you spoke about skilling, right? I mean, there are two parts to it, skill from a skilling that I look at. The one part of the skilling is that how can you leverage some of these tools to effectively be able to manage your deliverables, let's say, whether it is a user story, whether it is a PRD or whatever it is, right? But the other part is your core craft, right? So if what is your thoughts on that, that how should, now that hopefully PMs are able to free up some of their time, how should they leverage that time? What are the kind of activities that they should do in order to hone their craft to really move from, let's say, good to great?
Yeah. So I think I'll give you a mental model that I use for
Hmm.
myself. And so I think about it as systems of thinking, systems of building, and systems of collaboration. So
Hmm.
a lot of the examples that you shared in terms of using AI to create product PRDs, write user stories, create mock-ups, prototypes, I think that's all great. That's fantastic, because not only it improves time and efficiency, it reduces, frankly, dependency on other adjacent teams, including design, user research. You can move faster. So that comes under systems of building, right? And then systems of thinking, you can ideate now, right? You can use a copilot, and there are ways to do market research, competitive research, challenge your own thinking and gaps in your thinking, right? A lot of times you launch a product and you go, oops, I didn't think about that, right? And now, even before the PRD is written, you're like, I have this idea, or we have a product brief, right? Or you have your press release, right? If you're writing press releases, and you feed into Copilot and say, challenge me in the assumptions behind this, and you'll be surprised how much clarity that it generates for you in terms of thought. That is, that translates it to lesser opportunity costs. That translates into shipping fewer bad products, hopefully. So I think those are tangible, not just time and productivity savings, but also business and cost savings. And then systems of collaboration, right? So a pet peeve with a lot of product managers is too many meetings, too many stakeholders. Like, there are 5 or 6 teams that we need to align this, right? Align the roadmap, drive prioritization, and report progress. And you can use AI tools to automate that, create workflows, provide updates async so that you can reduce the meeting overhead burden and be more efficient in terms of how you communicate with stakeholders, right? But I go back to my premise, which is even if you deploy all these AI tools, the question is, where are you going to use the time that you save? If you're not going to use that time to understand the business better and to build a better partnership with your business, with your line of business stakeholders, with finance and sales, then I think you're still on the losing end. What's going to happen is your resume is going to have a spaghetti of AI tools on all over it, and you're still on the losing end of this disruption that's happening.
Yeah, completely, completely. I think it is very, very important, as you said, probably it frees up a lot of my time. And I think that should go back into what we were earlier talking as focusing on the fundamentals, which is understanding your business. I remember one of my students said that, to be able to building a mental model to be able to focus on, if I do this, what could be my second order thinking for this, what could be the third order impact of building something like this. I think that can only happen when you deeply understand your customer space and deeply understand your business space. So I think we
Yeah, and
should
here's where I
really.
think AI is really good. Again, I didn't, a lot of this, you and I had to learn and figure it out. I didn't have
Correct,
mentors teach me any of this, the second order
correct,
effects, right? Now with AI, I can go and say, okay, I'm about to do this. I'm about to ship these features. This is the capability that it provides. And here's what I think the expected impact is. Will it happen? And what are some of the pros and cons, right? So you can have that kind of back and forth, and ask yourself some sharp questions on what you're trying to achieve. From my perspective, it's pretty simple. If you're trying to increase the revenue, you're trying to go after new users, adjacent markets, expand to new regions, new geographies. If you're trying to reduce cost, you're probably trying to manage your pricing. You're trying to manage the level of manual steps that are there, from all the way from customer onboarding to support, right? You're trying to improve profitability, which is a huge thing, right? In the face of AI, understand those levers, and then you work with AI to drive some traction against those levers. I think again, the balance sheet is the balance sheet, the cash flow is the cash flow. That's not changing. So I think
correct.
you just have to work backwards and tie to one of these three parameters. And I think the other mistake that I see a lot of product managers and even product leaders do is wait and ask for permission, right? Product management is a very contrarian view, and you need to be an original thinker to be a really effective product managers, right? The top 1%, 2% product managers are
Correct.
all highly original thinkers, and right, the irony is, because it's a quote unquote a flashy career, everybody wants to jump into product management, and then you follow the herd, and you wait for input, you wait for somebody to ask you for a feature, you wait for somebody to give you some feedback, and so you're stuck in this treadmill and you're never able to get out of that treadmill, right? It's okay for you to take a step back and go to your leadership and say, here's what we should be doing, we should not be doing, here's the impact that we drove last quarter, etc. A lot of people, product managers, they're happy to talk tech, they're very reluctant to talk numbers.
Mm.
And if you ever aspire to grow in your career, product management or not, tech or not, you need to become very comfortable with talking numbers and data. And I think that's a key thing that's missing, I would say, even at a leadership level.
Yeah. No, very, very, very well said. And actually, on that, Rajesh, I want to kind of go into a little bit of rabbit hole there, because I think, see, with the while we spoke a lot about how AI's tools, especially, is helping product managers to get better, but there those who are building AI products, there are definitely new muscles that they have to build, right? And I think one of the parts which I hear a lot from either my mentees or from my students or from the startups with whom I work is, how do we have great ideas, we have spent time with our customers, we have spent this, based on that we are building these AI features, but then they need to understand the economics that goes behind building that product with all the new cost of resources, compute, and everything. And I think one of the most important places where they all seem to be struggling at this point of time is that monetizing, where the customers are saying that, I mean, we are not willing to pay 10x, because it is reality that the cost goes up significantly. But in terms of channelizing that, in terms of revenue, is not happening at the same pace. Are there any like mental models that you follow or that you recommend in this particular context?
So when it comes to AI monetization, I don't think there's any silver bullet, at least yet, right? I think the
Correct.
AI startups, I think they have an inherent advantage because you need to understand that they didn't have a, say, a suite of SaaS applications to begin with, right? So they didn't just sprinkle AI dust on it and mark the price. So they, I would say, they're at a significant advantage in terms of how they approach pricing, because they can try a lot of things, and they're not trying to defend their existing customer base or revenue base, right? So they're able to offer outcome based pricing, they're able to offer usage based pricing, all of different models. I think the jury is still out. What I see is, and we're also trying different models, a hybrid model, right, which is a combination of subscription plus usage. I think this is a great time and opportunity for product managers to think about tiering. And in the past, maybe customers have been reluctant to upgrade from that standard, or basic tier to your premium, right, or premium plus tier. This is a fantastic time to nudge those customers and basically say, hey, you know what, if you can upgrade to that premium tier, and you're going to get all these AI features. And I think that dents a little bit of the argument that I'm not going to pay separately just for AI, right? But
Hmm.
at the other end of it, you touched on something, which is cost. I think you have to keep a close eye and ensure that cost of tokens, especially output tokens, doesn't just run away, and you don't burn a hole in your pocket, right? There are some players I see charging per tokens. I don't think that's going to be a very popular pricing model moving forward. But I think if you go back to the typical kind of enterprise kind of pricing models and use this to nudge customers and users the right direction, I think that may be the right leverage. Which gets back to another point, right? Which is, how often do you talk to your users? And I say users and not customers. For
Hmm.
me, customers are buyers, and that's the job of sales. And if my rule of thumb is 30%, if 30% of your time is not spent talking to users, and you're hiding yourself behind dashboards and tools and product analytics and tools, then I think that's a huge missed opportunity, right? Because for you to make these right calls on monetization, you would have to have the pulse of the users, and as an extension buyers. I'm not denying that. But if you don't have the pulse of the users, that's when you go in circles, because then you're hypothesizing without understanding how they're using it and what they're likely to use from a use case perspective, from a feature perspective, from a capability perspective. And so I think that's something that has to be course corrected.
Correct. So yeah, I think what I completely summarize over here is that I think people should be spending a lot more time on customers, because that gives you the pulse of their pain point, the willingness to pay in case you are, giving them some kind of a magic bullet with your AI product, and how much would they be willing to pay for it, and also to continuously experiment with new ways of pricing and see when and where to position it so that customers would be willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, the engineers are spending more time with customers now, right? They're called forward deployment engineers. So if the engineers are spending more time with customers, what on earth is the product manager doing?
Correct.
Right? That's the question.
Right. And actually, that brings me to another point, right? See, in a traditional tech product world, in the non AI world, we always had this triad of, you have the product, you have the tech, and then you have the design, right? Now, what has happened is that with a bunch of these prototyping tools, especially that is coming in, at least your initial hypothesis, your initial idea, you're now able to give it you're actually able to give it a tangible view which can be taken to your customers, get feedback and all that. Now what I see is that, and with the code generating tools, the velocity for both the design team and the engineering team is definitely increasing. Product managers are also able to do much more because of access to such tools. Now, my question is that what does it mean for the future of the operating model for product and tech and other teams? Do you see that kind of collapsing? Do you see things becoming more leaner, or how do you see it evolve?
Yeah, I think it's going to change. I mean, design. You talk about disruption and tech. I think product design as a discipline, I think, is under a grave threat, because if my interfaces are fundamentally conversational, and I learned this during my time with conversational AI, then I'm going to build a lot more of conversational interfaces,
Correct.
right, and less of mobile and web applications and etc. And it's already happening.
Correct.
You can shop inside ChatGPT, you can plan, you can schedule. There's enterprise productivity and tools that are coming into ChatGPT with 5.2, and we're all comfortable with conversational interfaces. We don't need training. So that tells me that there'll be a significant adoption of that. And I think the question is then what happens to product design? But I think this triad model is under serious risk, and from my perspective, it may not exist a few years down the road. I think another model to look at as an example, and something that has worked well for me in the past, is what I would call a pod model, right? In a pod model, you have business, you have engineering, you have product, and they all sit within a pod, and that pod moves at its own speed and velocity. So kind of think of it like a vertical business units, if you will, right? And maybe there's some core platform services and shared services underneath, but these large monolithic product engineering design organizations, I think that era maybe we're witnessing the end of it. The other problem that this kind of monolithic model has created is you spend a lot of time orchestrating and stakeholdering, right? There's a director of product, there's a director of design, and there's a director of engineering, and
Yeah.
you all have to constantly play tag and align with each other. Whereas in the pod model, it's more of everybody just reports to a BU or a business head, and you just kind of move along, which again goes back to, are you serving the needs of the business and delivering the outcomes that the business wants, not kind of trying to build and protect your own fiefdoms. So I think that's the way, at least the way I see the future evolving, and that's one of the models that I've been part of, and it has worked pretty well. And you're able to get more velocity. One of the reasons for so much of noise around velocity is because today you spend a lot of time trying to create that velocity through alignment, stakeholdering, whatnot, even mid-sized organizations. And you fundamentally you have to think about how do you remove that friction, right? The AI tools will help, but then what happens when you as a product manager generate that tool and that output, and you walk up to your design team and they're like, no way, what do you do then? Or the engineering team's like, nice try with vibe coding, we're not going to deploy that in production. So I think as product leaders, you have to think about your organization structures to support these tools are incredibly powerful, and you're right, they're helping us move very, very fast. I use many of them, right, to build prototypes, to do design, etc., and it's incredibly powerful. So how do we support product managers, designers, etc., to move even faster, but without rethinking the organizational structure, the model, the operating model? I think you'll still end up coming to some of these constraints, right?
Yeah.
And then that kind of leads me to another topic, which is product management dead? I think it's a very contrarian title and generates a lot of interest. I think that question is missing the point. Product is here to stay. The question is it a role or a function? And I
Mm.
think that is what I would encourage your listeners to think about, because the minute you say it's a role, and that means that there can be a lot of product specialists, there can be a lot of people who can do product, talking to customers, talking to users, right? Looking at the business impact, looking at the ROI, not just shipping, right? So there's a lot of focus. The minute you say it's a function, it has a different dimension. Today, I think a lot of product managers sit squarely in the function bucket. But what if we started thinking about product as a role and created the right organizational structures and framework to enable that, right? That could be a win-win situation where a product manager is not just a punching bag, but at the same time we're starting to see some progress towards outcomes.
Right. So, what do you think in the future product managers may be called? Like, because there are a couple of things that I have heard, from some of the industry colleagues is that, for example, there was one senior leader I spoke to, and he said that, we are trying to build the muscle of our engineering managers to also double up as product managers. There was another instance where I heard that earlier the ratio of product manager or an SPM would be, let's say, one product manager to two scrum teams, and now they're trying to make it like 1:3. So with different organizations, depending upon their size, stage, maturity, and all that, are kind of trying to evolve with the changing times. If you had to give one name to the evolving role of product manager in the future, what would that be?
Product specialist, I think that's what I said. Product manager is like, I think, an artifact of the industrial era, right? You're managing a product, whatever that means. You're a product specialist, or somebody, or product advocate, right? And you're fundamentally responsible for two things. One is product experience, right? And from the time of acquiring, onboarding a customer, all the way to say a renewal. And that's the part that really kind of riles me up, because what are these groups? User research, growth, you have customer success. Okay, I mean, that's justified to a certain extent, I guess. You don't need those groups, right? You just need a product manager to take charge and say, right, I'm onboarding a customer, so from that point through the entire journey of that life cycle, I own that product experience,
Correct.
right? And with ownership comes responsibility. But again, don't wait for somebody to give you that ownership. Take that ownership proactively, right? And own that product experience. And when you own that product experience, you start touching a lot more things. You start touching code, you start touching design, you start touching the business, right? As opposed to kind of this cage you're in, and you're like, I'll just generate artifacts, I'll just put out specifications, right? And then that's what happens. The other part is, again, this is the inconvenient truth, which is, master the fundamentals, right? Master finance, master the business and the impact, right? If you're not able to spell out in 2 minutes how your product is and the features that you're shipping is able to increase revenue, reduce cost, improve customer satisfaction, one or the other, you're not able to do that in a meaningful way, then you should question what you're doing. So I
Yeah.
think, title aside, I think this is the mindset. Just like we talk about an AI first mindset, this is the mindset that is needed. And if you absorb this mindset, the good news is you may not still not make it to VP of product, but you will set yourself up to be a successful entrepreneur or a CEO in the future. I think the news I have for a lot of your audience is most of you will not make it to a VP of product, not because you're not capable, because I don't think these roles will exist in a meaningful
Correct.
way a few years from now. So what you can do is focus on what you can control, which is acquire all these skills, get really good at it, and go and start your venture. Because when you do, you have AI to write your code, you have AI that can do a lot of things. But now, because you have the business muscle and the tech muscle, you can run an organization, right? And a lot of CTOs and CIOs I see these days, CTOs specifically, who get promoted to CEOs, and that's a wonderful thing, right? And start thinking along those lines.
Yep, very, very, very well said, right? I think so. Do I gather that why product managers have always been required to understand business? You kind of touched upon you need to understand finance, the how the business is running. Earlier, the JD would also say that you have a flair for tech, you have a flair for design. Are there additional bullet points that you would add in terms of how the JD of the product manager would look like? Any additional skills?
Yeah, so I think, for me, look, a lot of this is going to be with AI, right? It's going to be orchestration, right? So your ability to create workflows, imagine workflows, whether it's, I would say, some of the less shiny parts of a product, right? Billing, configuration, provisioning of customers, analytics, reporting, the less glamorous part of a product. Your ability to reimagine those workflows and build that using AI and orchestrate those agents could be a significant value add or a skill set, right? Some of this is also discovery. Again, you should try and do rotations if that's possible, or stretch assignments. You should be spending 10-20% of your time in customer support, taking calls, answering questions on chat, or supporting customer success or sales teams with renewals, because the insights that you will pick up will be invaluable and then help you figure out what are the other things that you need to do, rather than here's the 5 set of things, and if you do it, you check this box, you're a great PM. And that's why assessing PMs is so difficult, because there's no one baseline, there's no one standard. But a very easy way to gauge this is, like I said earlier, what percentage of time on average do you spend with customers? What percentage of your time do you support other functions? Not just customer escalations, that's more reactive, but proactively going out, right? Talking to users, spending time troubleshooting tickets, being on the front lines, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. Uh, then that demonstrates an appetite for discovery and learning.
Hmm. Yeah, no, very well said. So I think they definitely be playing a much more business oriented strategic role, but at the same time, keeping their hands deeply into how the product is being built is very, very critical. Okay, I have one last question, Rajesh, for you. Is that what would you think? I know we kind of, earlier we would probably make a roadmap for 3 to 5 years, then that shrunk down to probably 1 to 3 years. And now I hear most of the teams are kind of looking at 3 to 6 months. Yeah. But with the changing time, if you have to think about one prediction, let's say for 2030, right, for product managers, would you like to share anything?
No, I think look again. There's the product tech world, right? So there's product management in tech and SaaS, and so then that's what you and I live and breathe, and so a lot of these predictions, quote unquote, are within that. But the thing I would like to remind your audience is that's a very small fraction.
Right.
The opportunity that I see is the expansion of product management into other disciplines, right? So think about education, think about government, think about public sector, think about manufacturing, healthcare. There's so much to do where the core skills of a product manager could come really handy. And again, not to hop on this, but unfortunately, it's like a mothball attracted to light. Everybody's attracted to tech because that's where, frankly, you know the compensation is attractive, and then there's a cottage industry around it where people are like, take my course and you'll get to be a fang PM, right? And here's how you can crack the interviews. It's really sad in a way, because then all you're optimizing for is for that. And again, not saying that people should not aspire to be a PM in one of the fang companies. It's a fantastic experience if you get to do it. But if you don't, it's okay. And there's a lot more you can learn. It's up to you what you want to do. If you're willing to leave aside that very high compensation bar for a minute and start thinking about some of these other verticals and domains for a moment that I just mentioned, then there's a lot of learning. And then maybe you can learn and you can still come back and apply for that, tech PM, that 1% tech PM role, right? And maybe that experience will enrich you. So I think spread yourself wide, think bigger about how, as a discipline, as somebody who can be a practitioner, how you can bring that. What that domain calls it is secondary. It doesn't matter. It could be called something else.
Yeah, no, very well said. I think the only way to survive, or I would say sustain your success, would be to remain adaptable because, again, product management is such a, ideally, it is supposed to be a very ill-defined, uncertain zone, and that is where your clarity, first principles thinking, to be able to extract clarity out of noise will continue. And I think maybe the name would change, but if you have these core craft, I think as product managers, you will, tomorrow you might be you an entrepreneur, a CEO, maybe a strategy officer, but I think you would still survive, and you will still be at the I would say a fence or a core of where you are bringing business, customers, and tech together. Maybe the
Yeah, I
size
think
and shape will change.
the triad should be business, customers, and tech, not product, tech, and engineering. That's
Correct.
internal. Let's focus on the business and on the customers.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, very well said. Thank you so much, Rajesh. I never realized how quickly the last 47 minutes have quickly gone by. But this was fantastic, and I'm sure the audience is going to find this super, super useful. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing some wonderful nuggets.
Yeah, I'm available on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect, and do sign up for the Product Arts and podcast. There's a lot happening in the tech space, so would love to have more folks listen and provide feedback. And thanks, Malti, so much for your time.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
We just need